All right, thank you, Suzette. You are a tough act to follow, my friend. All right, so I've got the pleasure of introducing one of our greatest champions in the U.S. Congress, and that's Congresswoman Chellie Pingree. She represents Maine's first district and is a national leader in food policy. She started her career as an organic farmer in the 1970s and has been engaged in food system reform ever since. In her hometown of North Haven, she owns Nebo Lodge and restaurant, as well as Turner Farm, a diversified organic farm that provides produce, meat, and cheese to Nebo Lodge and to local customers. In Congress, Shelly is an advocate for reforming federal policy to better support the diverse range of American agriculture, including sustainable, organic, and locally focused farming. As a member of the House Agriculture Committee and the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture, she continues to make food policy reform her top priority. Due to her leadership, the 2018 Farm Bill more than doubled funding for organic research, created the first federal produce prescription program, and established the first federal local food program with permanent funding. In the 117th Congress, Shelly was named chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies. She continues her focus on the intersection of climate change and agriculture with the expected reintroduction of the Agricultural Resilience Act, comprehensive legislation highlighting opportunities for farmers to be an integral part of the climate solution. Shelly also serves on the Appropriations Subcommittee on Military Construction and Veteran Affairs and Related Agencies. Quite an honor. Shelly, the floor is yours.
You can hear me, right? Yes, okay. Well, thank you, Roger. Thanks so much for introducing me. And now you know, all of you know way more than you ever wanted to know about me, but I feel very fortunate to have a chance to chat with you a bit today, and also to be serving in Congress and working on the issues that I do. I've long time been a supporter of food and agriculture issues. I have a small farm myself, and I am certainly a member of a co-op. Let's see, I'm a member of one co-op. I shop at two different co-ops. That's for food. And also in my community, we have an electric co-op. So the island of North Haven and Vinyl Haven, we combine our electric system, and our electricity is basically powered by three 1.5 megawatt wind towers. So we're very proud of our ability to do things as a co-op, including things like investing in wind power for our community. So I'm a big believer in the model, and really appreciate all of you on the call today and the work that you're doing. I'll mostly focus on food and agriculture, but happy to answer any questions or talk about any other issues you're concerned about. I just start by saying, I think that, you know, co-ops have been as important or more important in this past year than ever. We certainly have had a huge focus on agriculture and our food system. And so many of the things that are integral to particularly to food co-ops, are really the kinds of things that we need. More access to healthy food, locally grown food, more access to food for people who needed to participate in the SNAP program, or availability of food, covering those areas where we're still challenged by food deserts. To talk a little bit about food access, that this obviously has been a really challenging time. It's sort of laid bare the problems of our food system that many of us have been concerned about for a long time. We've watched, you know, farmers plow under fields of vegetables, slaughter hogs that couldn't get to the slaughterhouse, a whole variety of things, because our system was set up either on a just-in-time system or a bifurcated system, where if the restaurants weren't buying enough, there was no way to get it back into the system. And that's really been horrific to watch, when food banks have had 2 to 3 to 4 times as many people arriving looking for food for so many different reasons this year, but particularly because people were challenged economically or out of work. So some of the important things that we've been able to do in the last year, I think one of the most important was the 15% SNAP benefit increase. And I know many or most of you who work in food co-ops take SNAP benefits, and that's just so critically important. And while food banks have done an amazing job helping to get food to people, in my opinion, SNAP is the most important way to give people the dignity of choosing their own food and making those decisions for themselves, but also having sufficient money to put food on the table. A lot of you also participate in some of the programs like GusNIP. There are different names like Fresh Food Rewards and Double Bucks. But again, creating an opportunity for people to buy fruits and vegetables and have enhanced benefits through their SNAP benefits. And also, some of you have provided opportunities where there would have been a food desert, where it would have been hard if it wasn't for a co-op to have another shopping opportunity. So another thing we've seen during the pandemic is certainly the increase in interest in buying foods locally. I think when people walked into grocery stores and saw empty shelves, the first thing they said was, is there someone else who sells food here? And for many people, it became the perfect moment to make a connection with your local farmer, to join a CSA, to see what was being grown in your community. And I know in states like Maine, for many farmers, this was a good opportunity to enhance the number of people who were buying from them locally. I was really pleased to read something that said that about a third of the sales at food co-ops is locally procured food, which I think is quite amazing if that number's right. But even if it was only half true, I think it would be amazing, because your average grocery store only has 2 to 3% of locally grown food. And for so many reasons, it's an important economic engine for our rural economy. It really supports the growth of small to medium-sized farmers. And we've seen a really wonderful increase in New England and in other regions of the state. It deals with those supply chain disaster issues. And so it's something that I've worked on for a long time. You heard that mentioned. That was one of the proposals that I worked on to get into the Farm Bill, the LAMP program, Local Ag Market Program, which is now permanent funding, and it's there to support farmers. It has things like value-added producer grants, which allow farmers to become more food processors or do a value-added product. So that's really important. And we have added some money into that program in the pandemic funding. So there's still money going out through that program now. Another focus of our issues, of course, this year is really around equity and inclusion, making sure that people have more access to food, and that has to do with all kinds of things that I've already mentioned. Certainly how we deal with hunger, SNAP benefits, WIC benefits, all the things that enhance people's access to food, and also availability. And so, as I already said, that's a really critical role that many of you fill. Also, in our most recent plan, the most recent bill that we passed, which is the $1.9 trillion that you hear people talking about all the time, is $4 billion of debt forgiveness that strictly goes to Black and underserved Black farmers and underserved farmers. And that's a really important step to right some of the wrongs that have been happened through the USDA or particularly in Southern communities. The enormous loss of farm ownership for Black farmers is just yet another shame of our country. And so being able to start to make a down payment on fixing that, which just means that there'll be that many more farmers who can sell locally, who can have an opportunity to be in that business and to be landowners again, I think is really important. Just a couple of other things. So one of my focuses is around agriculture and climate change. I think it's a really it's an important lens that we look through right now. Of course, we have been very focused on the pandemic, on getting our country healthy, getting the world healthy again, putting our economy back together, all the things that we need to be doing. And here's hoping we're making that progress right now, and that the variants won't get ahead of us, and we can start to look at things this summer and feel, try to remember what normal was like. But the next looming crisis, which is already a crisis, is climate change. And there's no doubt about that. And the fact is that I hope we come out of the pandemic with a better understanding that we have to listen to the science, that when scientists tell you something bad is going to happen, you have to pay attention, that data matters, that we have to look at the numbers and we have to trust them, and facts and truth. matter too. And that there's a really important role for government in all of this, which is, 5 years ago were ideas we were having a hard time getting people to understand, but I think we'll be in a better place. So that's just a big picture look at the role that agriculture plays. And of course, there are concerns about reducing emissions within agriculture and some of the challenges that happen in particularly consolidated corporate farming and CAFOs. But I'm trying to focus on the positive things that farmers can do. And in New England, we have a lot of great examples of that. We have a lot of organic farmers who are already treating the soil and the environment in a better way. But we're looking to support more programs through the USDA and through other opportunities that are out there, particularly to have farmers have the ability to sequester more carbon in the soil. We generally have a tendency to think, well, to fix climate change, we'll just plant a tree and stop eating meat. And if it were only that simple, maybe we could all do that. But we can't plant trees everywhere, although Maine is 90% forested. So we're very happy to be full of trees, as is most of northern New England. And we really appreciate the work that our forests do to sequester carbon, but you can also sequester a lot of carbon in the soil. So having healthy farms, focusing on soil health, doing more research to make sure we're supporting farmers in doing that, accurate ways of measuring that increase in carbon in the soil so that we can better understand how it's working to help us is a really critical part of our bill. When I mentioned raising meat, it's because pasture-based livestock can also be a really important way to have permanent pasture and have that grassland sequester long-term carbon. So raising meat in the appropriate way is very different than many of the systems that we use now. But it has a few other areas, creating more opportunities for farmers to use on-farm renewable energy, solar, wind power, digesters, more research, more farm preservation, because if we start to lose, or we're already losing a lot of our farmland, but if we continue to lose it, that's just more land that turns into development and puts more carbon in the atmosphere, and we're going in the wrong direction. But the one other part that I really wanted to mention to all of you is the important section on food waste. And that's been another of my focuses for the last few years. I didn't start out thinking that was a major environmental or agricultural issue, but the more I've learned about the amount of food we waste in this country, about a third of it goes to waste. So that's just morally wrong when you think about hunger and the number of people who need to access food. It's wrong in the way we waste food. We waste the water and the labor it takes to grow it, everything about that. Also, most waste food ends up in the landfill and turns into a methane gas. So that's just even more of the bad gases that we're putting into the atmosphere. And this is a resolvable problem. It's actually one that people generally agree on. I mean, everybody's grandmother said, don't waste your food. So it's not like Republicans and Democrats argue about this, but it takes a lot of resources to really make it happen. And the bills we've worked on have really tried to take a comprehensive look at this, from how do we waste less food in the agricultural system? How do we make sure that a lot of things don't end up in the field, that there are standards that allow for, ugly fruits and vegetables to also get into the food stream, not a kind of perfection. Changing date labeling. The date labeling system is very arbitrary, not really controlled by any government system. So a lot of labels on the back of something, and if you're in a food co-op, you're looking at labels all the time. Many of them are just decided by the manufacturer. So trying to have some accountability around that, and also some understandable standards that tell you when something is absolutely not good to eat anymore because it might make you sick, or when it might just be a little bit old, but it'll be perfectly fine, could actually be the most cost-effective thing that we do to reduce food waste. But also getting to the other end, there are a lot of people in the food business, grocery chains, who have said we're going to have zero food waste by a certain date. That's making sure that all food gets sold, or it gets turned into cooked food and then sold, or it goes to a composting site. There's a whole variety of ways to make sure that we're no longer turning food into something that goes into the landfill and is just, goes up into the atmosphere. Lastly, I'll just say you represent, hundreds of thousands of members or tens of thousands of members and people who we need more than ever. I think people who choose to join a co-op are people who are more engaged in the process, whether it's an ag co-op or an electric co-op or a food co-op. And we have so much work to do to fixing the policies in our country and creating policies that allow us to move forward and do the things that we need to get done. So to the extent that you become a place of education for people, energize people, pass along information so that people know about many of the things that are going on that often, you don't see on cable news or you just don't hear about every day. I think it both gives an opportunity to have more engaged consumers out there who have some of the strongest voices. And frankly, it gives us the opportunity to change things in a real way that are really important. So I consider that partnership extremely important. And I'm always happy to pass along information that would be useful to you and always happy to have the active voices out there that are letting people know, because for so many of my colleagues in Congress, it's not necessarily that we disagree on everything. Sometimes they just have no idea about an issue of concern. And I find that particularly true in the food system for a lot of my colleagues, no matter what party they're in or what their political leaning is. They don't have a tendency to understand how critically important food is, how much people don't want to have toxics in their foods, that they want to have justice in their food system, that they want to deal with climate change and the way things are being grown in the future and want to buy food that's grown in an appropriate way. So you know some of the most engaged people on those topics, and we really do need their voices. So thanks again for having me here. You're a wonderful group, and it's nice to see all your faces on the screen.
All right, thank you, Shelly. And I'm going to tee it up with a question. I see there's a lot in the chat, and then I'll turn it over to Suzette to sort of facilitate that. How, I guess, on the climate change issue, I know there's so many pressing issues, but I feel like we've had to set it aside for the last 4 years, and now it's, now we've got a chance to do something. How do we assure durability to this legislation or any legislation dealing with climate change, that it doesn't become a victim of an annual appropriations process or a 2 or 4 year election cycle?
Well, it's a really good point because, I came into Congress with President Obama, and there was some action moving forward on, clean air and climate change and a lot of things that we lost over the last 4 years. So it is a really important question. How do we make sure when we make gains that we don't slip backwards? I would say the most important thing right now is that we have an administration that came in with that being front and center on their agenda. After the pandemic and restoring the economy, this is an administration that throughout all the administrative branches, including the Department of Agriculture, they are looking to make significant changes in the policies and the infrastructure around climate change. So it's a good moment in time, but I think it's really important we take very significant actions now, because if we try to just sort of dip our toes into the water, those are the easy things to reverse. But once you start going down a pathway of, for instance, electrifying vehicles in this country, automakers are doing that. There'll be the infrastructure to do that. You don't just turn back and say like, oh, that didn't work, because you've invested so much, and particularly on the economic side with the auto manufacturers. Same with agricultural practices. I think when consumers, who are usually the best drivers of the marketplace, when they routinely look at a product and say, I want to know how this was grown. Does it have a stamp that says it's climate change friendly? Or do I know that these soybeans didn't come from tearing down the rainforest in Brazil? Once you get that into people's vocabulary, there's no turning back. So I think that's what's critically important here for durability. I think you just have to change enough so that it gets to be part of our system, and also so people can see the economic benefits. It's easy to sort of stand back and say, oh, I'm not putting solar panels on my house, that's way too expensive. But if there are sufficient tax credits and availability and it's affordable, and all of a sudden you're no longer paying a bill to the electric company, or your next door neighbor is, well, you're going to say like, I want what he has, and I think for many things they're not widespread enough, but we know what the mechanisms are to do these things. And we really, more than anything else, just have to act fast. And I think that, you know, sad to say, in 2, 3, 4 years down the road, there will be no arguing about climate change. You know, every year it gets worse. There's more melting of the polar ice cap. There's more sea level rise, more dangerous storms, and we're moving much faster in the wrong direction, unfortunately. And that's just a reminder to people, this stuff is important to do.
Yep. Thank you. Suzette, I'll turn it over to you to facilitate some more questions.
Yeah, well, we maybe have time for one more. It's so hard to choose something, but maybe if there is, let's see, specifically, are there some particular legislation right now that our folks could press their congressional reps on in around food, food waste, plastics issues? Is there anything that's particular?
Absolutely. And maybe we could just send you a little curated list, if that would be helpful, and you can send it around. But I would say, of course, speaking of my own bills, the Agriculture Resilience Act, we're about to reintroduce that. And that had a long list of co-sponsors last time, but we want to do it again. We have a bill called the Food Recovery Act, which is all about food waste. There's some great bills around plastics and plastics in the ocean. And I'm forgetting the name right now, but the plastic issue is, we actually had a hearing in our committee a couple of days ago, and it's just off the charts in terms of, once again, going in the wrong direction, the damage it's doing to our environment, turning up in our food and our fish supply. And frankly, in a devious, backhanded way, it's getting even worse, because as we drive fossil fuels out of the transportation and home heating cycle, there's a lot of companies that want to do something with that petroleum product. So plastic manufacturing is actually going up at a time when it should be disappearing. So I'm happy to send you more. We do have I have a website. So it's, you know, Chellie Pingree, that's my name, if you look up my congressional website. And we do have a listing on there of bills related to climate change, bills related to agriculture and climate change, not just mine, but it's a good place to go scroll through and find out more. And if you have any specific questions, my email is Shelly@pingree.com. It's just my name. And I see Katie is in the chat. So Katie Berg is on the call, and she is our extraordinary staffer on agriculture and related issues. So, you know, feel free to get in touch with our office, or if you'd like us to just give you a list that was useful for particularly food co-ops or farmers co-ops, happy to do that. So thanks again for having me. It's a treat to see you all, and really, really grateful for the work you do.